Ladies and gentlemen, I can promise you, paradise won't be lost here tonight. In prime time, on the brightest lights, the biggest stage, the platform where most certainly all wrestling and all music matters, because we have on a legend. You think about one of the premier metal bands ever in the world. We're here to talk about them. We're going to definitely, I have no doubt, be saying more than an Electric Messiah is going to be here. I have no doubt we're going to be talking about here an odyssey of this man's journey. And this band's journey, the symphonyx, which symphonyx has celebrated more than 30 years in this game, and they're on tour, about to be on tour, coming up here in a matter of days. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about them coming up here to a city near you. We're going to talk about some of the things the band is working on, and it's 10 years that has now passed since the last album. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Well, maybe we'll go into an Underworld or two. We'll also talk about this man's journey, because this guy has played with some pretty heavy hitters. You probably heard of this band Manowar and this guy Ross the Boss. I'll talk about that for a few minutes. We'll also even touch upon maybe his own solo work, which I actually have a couple of things I want to say about that, which I haven't heard anybody else ask him on. So we'll get into that. And plus, I may even have something for him and the band that they've never gotten, because I checked my facts. I checked and I was like, boy, they haven't gotten this. And there was some pretty big news in the world of heavy metal earlier this morning, which a band that our guest is a part of actually played on tour with once upon a time. The clue is Gigantor, and I'm going to talk about maybe the reactions there that our guest has about that. Plus, who knows whatever else. But I know that our guest has done many, many podcasts before, and I do things a little differently, because the reason that I've gotten in touch with our guest here is because we're big in the wrestling world. And yes, the WWE has come on here. We've been very honored with that. But since we are in prime time on the brightest lights, the biggest stage, and we get all these wrestlers and the WWE guys, we give them that introduction. I'm warning you, you may be one of the loudest bass players. You may play with some of the loudest guitar players, keyboard players, drummers, and singers out there. I am going to give you an introduction that'll certainly give Michael Buffer a run for his money. But since we are here, and I know my chat is going to watch this eventually, some of my supporters are going to watch this, and you were looking at me, come on, let's get this show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, in the famous words of Def Leppard frontman Joe Elliott, let's get rocked, baby, and start this show off here in style and introduce a heavy metal legend here on Sportzwire Radio, the number one global radio station where all wrestling and music matters. So with that, wait for it. Further ado, here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show. A man that is also a part of his own band, Mike LePond, Silent Assassins. He's played with the likes of the legendary Ross the Boss, and of course, from one of the premier bands in heavy metal history, symphonyx. His name is simply put, Mike LePond. My friend, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, man. That's a fantastic intro. I don't think...
I was going to do the war chant. I know you do write some stuff kind of like that, but I usually do a war chant intro, but in the interest of time, I'm like, let me not make this further longer to make this legend wait. But yeah, in wrestling, because we do a lot of wrestling on my platform, that's kind of how I've gotten the ability to speak with you. Shout out to Alexander Ford, who somehow likes me. I have no idea after this interview, he probably won't. But we do the war chants. We do 7-8 minutes, and people do it with me in my chat, and the wrestlers go like this. But I didn't want to do that to you. You're a busy man. You're about to go back on tour, and I want to talk about that because it is an absolute honor to have you, sir, here, Mike LePond. Thank you for all that you've done in representing heavy metal. Thank you for all that you've done with symphonyx, and I want to talk about it for those that are listening and watching here in prime time on the brightest lights, the biggest stage, the platform that you and certainly symphonyx have helped build Sportzwire Radio. Talk about, we're about to go out on tour here in a matter of days, and what can we expect city to city from you and the rest of symphonyx?
Yeah, it's that time again, and we're about to hit the road. It's going to be primarily a West Coast tour.
Canada,
Because,
a few dates as well, right? We have Canada, we have I think Edmonton, right? We're going to play on there as well.
yeah. So we'll also kind of circle around Canada as well. Doing the West Coast mainly because on the last tour we did, we kind of missed those dates. So we're making up for that. And, we're looking forward to it. We're learning some new songs for the tour. We get a lot of feedback from our fans. They're like, "Hey, how come you didn't play this? How come you didn't play that?" It's impossible to please everybody, but we're going to do our best to pull out some cool songs that haven't been played in many years. So we're looking forward to it.
It's funny that you said that. I just saw King's X last week, and King's X, like you guys, has a vast catalog, and I was listening to what people had to say on social media. I'm in all these groups, and people were like, "Well, why didn't they play this song? Why didn't they play that song?" And I've had on a number of different bands on here of late, LA Guns, and I've had Great White, and I had Kicks when they were active, and it's kind of the same thing with you guys now because you guys have a vast catalog. Even though you haven't put out a record in a while, there's still so many songs to go through. Is that a challenge getting ready for this tour here coming up in the next few weeks of just songs that maybe you want to keep in the set list, but also songs that a lot of the fans want to hear and maybe haven't heard in a while? Is that a challenge for you guys as a whole collectively?
Oh yeah, it's a massive challenge, because there's songs that, we as a band enjoy playing. And then there's songs that maybe our older audience wants to hear. There's songs that our newer audience wants to hear. And we're just trying to like thread the needle and just kind of get it to where, everybody's kind of happy, maybe not,
Yeah, one thing in rock is, it's different in the wrestling world because you can always please somebody kind of, but in the rock world, I find, and I've had all these bands on lately, and there's always one fan or multiple fans out there that's like, "Well, you didn't play this song, you didn't play that song, I didn't hear the note a certain way," and I know it's a challenge for you guys, but it's kind of funny now that you guys are playing almost a different part of the country, and also Vancouver. I have the poster up here in a minute for it. What's that like for you guys? Maybe going and playing in these different. I know you guys did Brazil last year. You did a number of different places, South America and other parts of the country. But now going more West Coast, in addition to places like Vancouver, Edmonton, and then circling back home here at the Vogel Center in Red Bank, which we'll talk about at the end. But I mean, what's that like for you guys? Playing these different parts on this tour here coming up.
Yeah, in the U.S., the culture is all kind of, as far as heavy metal goes. I mean, the culture is all kind of the same. I mean, they all kind of want to hear the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, it's different if we were going to, like you just mentioned, South America. If we were going to South America, we would probably be thinking about playing different songs because there, as a collective culture, they like kind of different stuff than the American fans because the American fans kind of discovered us a little bit later. So usually they want to hear stuff that's not super old. You know what I mean?
Paradise Lost, Underworld, Iconoclast. Yeah, I mean, probably more stuff in what you've done recently for sure. I get that.
Right. In the US, I think the Odyssey was like the first record that kind of broke us here.
I remember that in school, actually. There was a kid that I was friends with, and we was like the Headbangers, and he was a bass player, and I attempted to be a bass player, but years later I got into this, and he always talked about symphonyx, and it was the album The Odyssey, and he always talked about it in school, and then that was kind of the first time that I really heard about you guys, which was in 2002. I never forget that. It was always, he talked about, because everybody knew Dream Theater, everybody knew Queensryche, everybody knew Rush, but then it was like this kid that I was friends with, I would walk home with from school. He always talked about Symphony X, and he talked about Michael Romeo. He talked about Michael Romeo, and he talked about Russell Allen. And I was like, I didn't know. And then I got immersed into it a few years later. But yeah, the Odyssey's the first one I feel like that I kind of heard about you guys. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you know what? Most of the time, we'll play a show, and when we come out from the encore, when we come out for the encore, I should say, the crowd is all almost in unison shouting "Odyssey, Odyssey." They want to hear the long title track,
I was going to mention that. Yeah, I mean, they want to hear that 24 and was it 24 minutes and like 14 seconds or something like that?
Yeah. So then, as a band, when we're coming up with the set, we're like, well, everybody wants to hear the Odyssey now, but other people want to hear other songs. If we play the Odyssey, it's going to cut so much into the set. We're only going to have so much time for other stuff. So
Yeah.
sometimes we do the Odyssey, sometimes we don't. And so we just kind of see how we feel at the time, and we just kind of go by that.
I knew this was going to come up, and I was going to ask you, playing a 24-minute song live. It's one thing in the studio. Famously, I remember when Geddy Lee would get asked about playing 2112, and eventually they would come out and play it, but they didn't play it for several tours. And with you guys playing a 24-minute song, 24 minutes and 14 seconds. I mean, I just saw King's X, and I couldn't imagine King's X playing a 24-minute song. And King's X is another band that certainly has that tendencies to play some longer songs. But for you as a musician, playing something live with all the time changes, all the different breakdowns, and a song like that, what's that like? Is that a challenge playing something like that live?
Oh yeah, because you have to memorize the whole thing, every part of the whole song, and it's a massive undertaking. So the only good thing is, since we recorded it in 2002, we've been playing it for so many years that
True.
that
Yeah.
we could just come out and we could just blast it out, no problem.
Yeah.
We just gotta, if we wanted to rehearse it, we could probably have it together in one practice. But yeah, it's a lot of challenges, and there's so many parts and there's so many dynamics. So some parts of the song you have to take it down. Some parts of the song you have to bring it back up, and it's almost like a theater production.
Yeah. Yeah, I could
Um,
totally see that. Yeah, I could totally see the different parts, and I do want to plug it once again. Also, Symphony X is out on tour. You can go out now to the band's website or on Instagram, which is Symphony X Official. You can go out there and buy a ticket to where they're going to be coming. They're also playing the Prague Power Fest here coming up, which is right after Labor Day. That's from the 3rd to the 6th. That's going on. You'll see the band in some of that coming up at Atlanta on the 6th. You're also going to see him here locally because I'm in New York City. You guys are playing on the 29th at the Vogel Theater in Red Bank, almost near here in New York City. We're going to try to make that show. I was lucky. I got to speak with Doug Pinnick of King's X, and they played at the Gramercy, which is a place you've played before, and I got a chance to see the band. But for now, you can see them all across up and down the West Coast, and they come back home here on the 29th. They'll also have, for most of the shows, Sonata Arctica is the opener. So definitely please go to the band's website, also Instagram, Facebook. And I want to thank Mr. Alexander Ford for whatever reason giving me the opportunity to speak with you. But yeah, I do also want to say one of the songs I heard first from the Odyssey album that I remember hearing from you was Eddie Trunk here in New York. Once in a while would play your music, and I think the song he played was The Wicked. I think Wicked was the one because it was the song that it was probably like one of the shorter ones on the album, if I recall correctly, and he would slide it in because famously he had a show on here in New York on WNEW, which then became 104.3 Q104 Friday nights, and I would stay up and listen to it. I remember hearing, I believe it was The Wicked was on one of his shows on 104.3, and I also remember hearing about you then. But yeah, definitely a challenge, and you've got some other songs I hope to hear on there. Electric Messiah, Children Without a God, and I'm sure a lot of stuff in there, which kind of brings me to your last album just recently. It's been now 10 years since it came out, and I know there's been a lot of chatter amongst the fan base and everywhere else about you guys putting out a new album. And are we getting closer to that reality eventually with a new album from the band?
Yes, we are getting closer, and yeah, the fans, I mean that they're clamoring for a new album. I can't blame them. It's been 10 years. If Judas Priest didn't come out with an album for 10 years, I'd be pretty mad too. So,
Yeah,
uh,
duly noted. Duly noted.
but yeah, I mean, we have been writing it. Um, we have most of the parts kind of together. Now it's just a matter of recording it really. So it's definitely coming. And we're thinking if things stay on track the way they are, we're thinking next year. So we're excited. I mean, the stuff sounds really, really cool, and believe me, I want you guys to hear it as soon as possible.
We talked about the Odyssey, and obviously that had such a variety. The title track, 24 minutes long, and then the last two albums, not to say it was more straightforward, but there was certainly a little bit of a different feel on those albums. Do you anticipate whatever the album will be when it comes out will be more in line with, let's say, what we heard from Underworld, or will it be more like the Odyssey or previous albums? Where are you in that process, do you think, in terms of what style it'll be in terms of that?
Well, the Underworld record, I felt encompassed a bunch of Symphony X styles.
Yeah.
I think the new record, judging from what I've been hearing, um, I think it's going to even more kind of be like a summary of Symphony X's career as far as our musical directions, because we've went on a few directions.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
as you mentioned, there was a point in our career where we got noticeably heavier and a little more straighter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
Um,
definitely agree with that. There's some of the band's catalog. It's more of a straightforward approach. Others is definitely in that longer form, definitely incorporating different elements, and I think that's what always has made you guys stand out, and that's why I think the fans are so eager for a new album because it's just been so long. It's funny because I had Doug Pinnick on, and we talked about King's X went 14 years without a new record, and I talked with him about coming out with another record, and he said, well, it's a challenge sometimes because as an artist you're putting so much out in focus on being on tour and the fans. You have such a versatile catalog. You guys kind of fall in the same category. I know different things happened. Obviously, Russell was an Adrenaline Mob, TSO, and we had COVID happen. But is it also a challenge as an artist with a band like yourself, where you guys have had so much success and so many albums that maybe it's almost pressure to put out a new album? Because talking with different people, I had Mark Kendall of Great White, and it's kind of the same thing. They haven't put out a new record in 8+ years. They've changed singers multiple times, and it's almost like some bands want to just now release just a few songs and then see what the fans want. And is that something that's crossed you guys' minds as well and such?
yeah, I think that's very well put. Yeah, with Symphony X, um, there's tremendous pressure on us to consistently do great records.
Yeah,
Our fans, I mean, they're really diehard fans, and they're so supportive, and they expect only excellence from us.
yeah,
So that's always in the back of our mind. So if we're working on something, and maybe it's good, but we're not sure, we won't use it. We're only going to put songs on the record that we feel are excellent and worthy of the fans. So absolutely, that plays a role. And but like you were saying, the other things too. You had COVID, and in and out of touring. Once you
Yeah.
start touring, then you forget about the writing, and then you come back to it, and then you forget where you left off, and you start again. And um,
It's hard. It's hard because again, you're trying to juggle all these different things, and it's just not easy. Because like I said, I speak with these different artists, and it's a thing that comes up. I had Randy Jackson of Zebra, and they haven't put out a record in 20 plus years, and he talked about, yeah, we're gonna finally get there. It's not that we haven't wanted to put an album out, but it's
so,
just you go out there, different responsibilities, and I'll make you laugh. They put out two records in 38 years. I mean, one of them came out Zebra 3, and then it was Zebra 4. That it was eight,
wow,
17-year lap, and now they're finally talking about a new one, and they released a song when they were playing live. It's 22 years between new songs. I mean, there are some bands. Listen, I mean, Dream Theater just put out a new album earlier this year, and to be honest, like even they had a little bit of a break between albums. Portnoy comes back in the band, and even their last couple records before that, I don't know if I was into them as much. This one was really good, so I understand where you're coming from with that. One of the things I did want to talk about, because obviously I had mentioned getting into the band, and there's some big news here in heavy metal about Megadeth, and Megadeth is putting out one more album, and they're doing a farewell tour. You guys, I remember very well, famously on the Gigantor, and it was funny. I had talked about you coming on my show a few days ago because we get all these wrestlers on, and one of my wrestlers in my chat, I have to shout out Ox McCoy, who's the IMF Hardcore Champion, is a big fan of yours. He's like, I love symphonyx. He was like, finally, you have a good band on, and not to disparage some of the hair metal bands I had on, but obviously you guys were on that tour with Megadeth and Dream Theater. Overkill was on that. Anthrax had tried to come back with Joey Belladonna at that time, and I was just curious from afar what your reactions were to the news today about Megadeth announcing a farewell tour and one final album.
well, for me personally, I mean, I was a huge fan of Megadeth right from the get go. Like, I knew about their first album that was going to come out months before it came out because there was so much chatter about it. And then when I finally got it in 1985, I just loved it. And then I've been following the band for years. Always loved the band, and then as you mentioned, Symphony X got to play that Gigantor,
Yeah, I remember
and
that tour. I was so pumped up for that tour as a kid. I was so excited because of the bands. It was like, wow. I mean, Ozfest was great, but this was like I liked every band on the bill. It was like amazing.
And what was so cool is, we got to meet Dave, and I mean, he was a really nice guy, and he really welcomed us. And he said that his son had really liked Symphony X, so he checked us out and put us on the Gigantor, and we were just so appreciative. And that's really because that's when the Odyssey record was out. That's what
Yeah.
really broke us in the U.S. Finally playing to like arena audiences. That finally, broke us. So we have eternal thanks to Dave, and I'm sad to see that Megadeth is only going to do one more record, but I understand it. We're all getting older, and he has nothing left to prove. I mean, his band has left their mark on heavy metal forever, and I love him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I've always liked Megadeth's work, and I think that people will be definitely excited to see them on tour just as much as they'll be excited to see Symphony X. And you can go to the band's website, also Instagram, Facebook. We're here with the bassist of the band, Mike LePond. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. Your voice, figuratively and literally, all wrestling and music matters. And if you're here on Sportswire Radio, like, share, and subscribe to this. And I also have something I want to give the band here in a few minutes. But yeah, I mean, definitely we'll see what they do coming up. They have a new record that'll be out, they say, earlier in 26, and we'll I'm sure keep an eye on that. And yeah, the Gigantor was a great tour, and I really got a chance to really dive more into you guys after that. But I did want to talk about your solo work for a few minutes, because one of the things I noticed, and I know you've done a lot of interviews about your solo records, you had 3 of them, and I always felt as a bass player, I attempted to play bass, and my brother plays the drums, my mother sings actually, and so I got to give them a shout out. But I always felt as a bass player on your Silent Assassins records, I don't know if it was more of you had a comfort as a bass player to hear some of your bass lines, but not to compare your bass work in Symphony X to like Jason Newsted's in Metallica after he joined with And Justice for All, and they buried the bass line in there. But one of the things I really liked about your solo work is your bass playing. Just it was different stylistically. Was consciously or subconsciously one of the things when you approached your solo work was that your bass playing would be much different, because I just feel your bass playing on those records was so different stylistically, and I was just curious on that and what your thoughts were.
Oh yeah, it's definitely different. I I grew up growing up, I loved bands, like Megadeth, Metallica, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and I would always write songs that way. Now, Symphony X is a different style than that. It's more progressive. So usually in that kind of a situation, the bass is utilized differently. The music is very busy, so the bass, is not going to have a lot of room, to jam out and go crazy. You got to pick your spots. So over the years, I had so much songs that had built up over the years that didn't fit Symphony X's style that I still wanted people to hear. And also, I wanted my fans to know that my bass playing is not only progressive, it's power metal too.
Yeah.
American power metal style. So I put those records out, and a lot of those songs were songs that I had laying around that didn't fit Symphony X's style, and the same with lyrics. And it was a lot of fun, and I wanted it to sound like Iron Maiden with the bass really up loud.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I loved how you started, a lot of the tracks where your bass would come in first. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I love Symphony X, don't get me wrong, but your bass playing, I would just hear, okay, now that, he is not just this guy that, you almost hear it buried in the bottom, and, bass players can hear this, it's buried in the bottom, and yeah, he's playing his part, but in your solo work, it was just like, right there in front of you. It's like, okay, he's playing a solo in the opening. He's riffing it. It was like it's almost like you're setting the tempo. I think that was something I hadn't heard people really ask you this in your interviews you've done. I just like as a bass player, I could hear that. I definitely hear the Steve Harris reference. I hear Halloween a little bit in there. I hear a little bit of Merciful Fate. I hear some of that stuff. Certainly Manowar. I definitely like I hear that's more straightforward. Power stuff that maybe you explore here and there in Symphony X, but I really thought your solo work kind of shined who you are as a bass player in that sense.
yeah, the music is just a lot simpler, just straight ahead in your face, heavy metal, and that gives the bass guitar a lot more room. So
Yep.
I
Yeah.
just had a blast doing that, and I'm really proud of the 3 records I did. It was a lot of fun, and creatively, it got all this creativity out of me and put it out there for everybody to see. And I hope people get to eventually listen to it in their travels. And I'm just blessed to be in Symphony X because that's how I was able
Yeah, I mean,
to do
listen,
this.
it's crazy. You've been in the band now 26 years in Symphony X. I mean, not to say you're the new guy still, but 26 years in the band. I mean, that's amazing that, you're a guy from New Jersey. I'm a guy from Brooklyn, and I get that whole thing. And to be able to have those opportunities, and Symphony X definitely led them. And if you're on Instagram as well, please follow Mike. You can see Mike LePond, Silent Assassin. Oh, it also didn't hurt that you had Metal Mike that you played with on the first record, who only played on 2 of my more favorite records of the 2000s. He played on Crucible and he played on Resurrection with Halford, which were just, great songs. In fact, one of the songs almost reminded me of a wrestling entrance. And I also have to tell you, you probably don't even know this, but on your first solo record, which is self-titled, you actually have 2 songs on there, which are wrestlers. One of them, which is Masada, there's a very well-known, you don't even go look it up, but there's one very well-known wrestler that follows me. His name is Masada. He's kind of like the go-to deathmatch hardcore wrestler, or one of them. He's one of the OGs in the death. So many of my wrestlers on my platform, they idolize him. And you have a song named Masada, and also you have a song named Ragnarok, which is also a wrestler that's been mentioned on my platform many times and works for a backyard wrestling company that's been on my platform. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, legendary backyard wrestling. We have Ragnarok, and there's another guy also named Long Run Ragnarok. So there's another guy I know in Arizona that's also wrestles as Ragnarok, and I didn't bring him on my platform, so I won't make sure he knows this. But I did want to let you know that you've definitely got the wrestling world there covered, because you have 2 of your songs named after wrestlers. You're probably like, I had no idea about this. Nobody will ever ask me that again, but I thought that it would be good to let you know that. And yeah, they were great records. I love them, and I remember hearing them. I think it was Metal Injection that talked about them. They did some reviews on there, and I caught it there, and I caught some of the work. It's on SoundCloud, it's on YouTube, all that stuff. Please follow. And before I give you and the band something, I got to ask you about Ross the Boss. You worked with Ross the Boss, obviously, Manowar, one of those, to me, legendary bands. Certainly, maybe not as much in America, but when you think about Europe, you think about Manowar and the legacy that they have. So many bands, to me, owe Manowar a debt of gratitude. And Ross the Boss, another local guy, you worked with him on his album in 2020, and I was wondering, especially because I know there's 1 or 2 people that I'm sure are going to watch this that I know are going to be like, oh, I know Ross the Boss. So what was it like working with Ross the Boss?
Well, it was an amazing experience because Manowar was always one of my favorite bands of all time. And, Joey DeMeo, the bass player of Manowar, always.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was one of the most underrated players ever. And
Yeah.
so, it's funny because, when I was in high school, I would put on the Manowar record and I would play along with it. And all these years later, I'm on stage and I look over at the other side and there's like the guitar player. And it's like, wow, I'm here, I'm like in Manowar. So I had a great time playing all those classic Manowar songs. It was great to see the fan reaction from the stage of those songs, because I've always been in the audience. So just seeing the love people have for that band, and Ross is just the sweetest guy you ever want to meet.
I think I'm friends with him on Facebook, and I don't even know it, because little known fact, you were in a band, Sleepy Hollow, that I know somebody else that was in a band named Sleepy Hollow. This guy Joe Dell, who also another Jersey guy from Lodi. So I kind of thought, okay, there's going to be some connection here or some reference. But yeah, I've heard a lot about Ross the Boss, and he's friends with Ross the Boss. So I come up a lot on my platform.
And I know Joe as well.
Yeah, Joe Dell. Yeah, definitely. Mr. Joe Dell he's an interesting fellow. In fact, you can't see it up here, but on the other side of my wall, he autographed a Sleepy Hollow record for me. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Joe's an interesting guy. Yeah. Shout out to Joe.
He's a really cool guy. And Ross, I did that for I did that up until the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it was a total blast, and definitely one of the highlights. One of the highlights of my career was through Ross, because there was a point where KK Downing decided he wanted to make a comeback.
Guys, I remember that. Yes, I do. Yes.
And this is right before KK's Priest.
Yep.
So Ross was, me and Ross were going to play at a festival in the UK, and I don't know who finagled it, but KK was going to join us on stage and play Priest tunes.
Wow!
So,
okay.
So there's video on YouTube of Ross the Boss and KK playing priest tunes. I think it was the Bloodstock Festival, if I'm not
Oh, okay.
mistaken.
I remember reading about that festival. I remember
And
reading
that
Blabbermouth.
was that was a blast, man. Jamming with him on one side, KK on the other side.
It's heavy
Yeah.
metal royalty. Listen, that's heavy metal royalty. You've had such an interesting career, right? Because you worked with Metal Mike, who obviously played with Halford. He played with Sebastian Bach.
Oh yeah.
You've played with Michael Romeo and Symphony X, and you've played with Ross the Boss. And like as a musician, what's that like? What difference? I know you worked with, again, you've done so many albums, but you work with these like such influential guitar players or such important players in metal, and what's that like for you to work with them, and what did you gain from that?
I learned from every single one of these guys. All of them have their own approach to not only guitar playing. They have their own approach to songwriting, um, how they talk to the fans, how they see, how they manage their career. All these guys do things differently, and I've learned a lot from all of them. And not even them. Any project I've done uh, over my life, everybody has their own way of doing things, and I just absorb it all, and I learn from it. And I just learned to be humble, and just be, just acknowledge how lucky I've been to work with such giants in the industry.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's great advice as we're here for a few more minutes with the legendary Mike LePond, of course, bassist from the band Symphony X, which is getting ready to go back on tour here in a few weeks, and they'll be touring most of the tour with Sonata Arctica. They'll also be playing the Prague Power Fest there for a bit. You can check out some of the band's dates on their website, symphonyx.com, also on Instagram, Facebook. Check him out there on YouTube. Mike also has his own page, Mike LePond's Silent Assassins, and my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. You have voiced figuratively all wrestling and music matters. It is funny that you talk about being humble, because I get a lot of these wrestlers on, and I've had the WWE on. It's been a great honor. I've had guys that have been like Symphony X that have been worldwide renowned. And I almost have to ask you this question before I give you something, because I ask everybody like yourself, somebody who's been there and, played in front of thousands, 50,000 here in the festivals. And, you guys tour around the world, and you guys have sold out shows. You've had top 10 records around the world. And, like, what advice would you give to anybody? Because again, it could be anybody, musician, entertainer. I'm kind of the go-to place for the underground wrestling scene. You're in the underground metal scene around the world, and it's kind of how funny things revolve around. But, what advice would you give to anybody that's doing anything that they are about to aspire in?
Yeah, I guess the best advice I could give to an aspiring musician who wants to get somewhere in the heavy metal rock and roll world, um, it's it's also a business. It's not all fun and games. It's a business, and you've got to keep your head on straight. You got to keep your head on straight, and you got to keep your morals together, because you could easily just fall into a life of, because everybody, when you're out there, everybody wants to do stuff for you. Everybody wants to give you stuff. And you start to have this attitude where you think you deserve all this stuff. And your ego kind of gets out of control. So keep your ego in check. Um, keep your mind to the ground, and remember that you're not going to become a millionaire. So just try to have something to fall back on if it doesn't work.
That's a great point, because I've had on a few different musicians, and I had Mark Farner of Grand Funk Railroad, and he told the story famously about the band has all these big hits, and early on in their career, their manager actually basically took away most of what the band would have got in terms of points. Every song you get points on or an album or a song, and the band wound up spending almost all of their worth early on in terms of trying to get that back, and they didn't. And he wasn't angry about it, though, and he did have the success later on, so it kind of evened that. I also had Brian Damage Forsyth from Kicks, and they had, one big hit, and they didn't get they had the platinum album, but it was years later on. And, their frontman, Steve Whitehead, famously talks about during their time in the first run of the band, they only made $500 a week. So, that's what he said. So, people think, oh, you're a rock star, and it's kind of like the wrestling world. I get a lot of wrestlers when people think on my platform, oh, everybody's, they're making, thousands upon thousands a day and millions. And really, it's not the way people envision it on TV. So yeah, I mean, I've heard those stories firsthand. But I have a couple things for it, because I want to get to a few more things with you. And you're a very busy man, but I got a couple things for it, because I am almost 100%. I can't say I'm 100%, but I'm 99.9% certain. You first of all haven't got these two items. The first one here is on all Sportswire radio platforms. It is symphonyx Day, because I'm pretty sure that you haven't got one of these yet. And I'll make sure Mr. Ford gets that for all my platforms: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, the sportswireradio.org website, and everywhere else that's out there. Twitch. It's symphonyx Day, and I'm not done, because I made sure to look this up. I made sure to see, you know what? I don't think they've gotten this, because symphonyx is now in the Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame, because you guys should be in the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame. I know that that's been around now for a while, and you know what? Let me beat them to the punch, because I'm sure that in a few years or somewhere in Europe they'll induct you in a Hall of Fame. But I wanted to be the first to put the band in the Hall of Fame there. So congratulations! I'll give this to Alex when we're off the air, and thank you for all you guys have done for metal. And yeah, it's crazy. I am talking to somebody that I remember as a kid listening to their music. I told the story about my friend in school. He talked about symphonyx, and he would talk about Michael Romeo and Russell Allen, and you would come up from time to time. And then we talked about Gigantor. I remember how excited I was about that, watching MTV2 and the Headbangers Ball would come on Saturdays and Saturday nights, and they talked about the Gigantor. You played on that and your records, and all the success. And here these years later, and I kind of have some type of success. Don't know why in the wrestling world, and I get a chance to speak with you, and I wanted to show my appreciation and thank you. And I want to thank all the wrestlers, all the companies that have supported me and gotten me to the thousands of subscribers and the thousands of followers, because truthfully, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have got a chance to talk to you. And Alexander Ford, for whatever reason, would want to still talk to me. Not sure why, but I want to ask you a couple more things. I haven't heard anybody ask you this, but is there like one or two moments that stand out most in your career so far that were maybe the most memorable?
I think one moment that stood out. The first thing that comes to my head is, there's been a few times where we've met former soldiers or current soldiers in their respective militaries around the world. And when they talk about being in harm's way and how they listen to symphonyx, and that music would get them through whatever terrible times they were getting through. And that's just, wow, that's amazing. When you're sitting in your bedroom just working on a riff or a part, you never think that could be the one of the results. So that always blows me away. And I think some of the audience sizes, some of these giant festivals that we play. I remember we played a festival in Colombia, South America.
Okay.
And the crowd was so huge that it was like, like if you're watching TV at some major event and you can't see the end of the crowd, it just looks like
wrestling. It's WrestleMania, so yeah, that's what. Yeah, I'm aware.
And it was that, and I'm like,
wow,
it didn't even seem real. It feels like you're in a movie. But those two events kind of come out at me first. So, and this has happened more than once. Both these scenarios. So, and there's tons more that I can't
I
even
mean,
think of.
but you know what though? That's a great thing because I had Mark Farner on who played in Woodstock, and then I had Doug Pinnick with King X who opened Woodstock too. So it's kind of in a way similar to what you as a band. Because yeah, the band. I mean, in Europe and South America, you guys play these festivals, and yeah, it's like 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. Whereas
Mhm.
like in America, the metal scene. I don't want to like down it, but the metal scene kind of like went
Yeah,
underground. Whereas in Europe and South America, you guys are like, I mean, your records chart in the top 10, top 20 regularly and, without even blinking an eye. And you guys have had such that devoted following. That's why you guys kind of broke first in Europe. I always remember like people talking about it. You guys broke more. Then later on, yeah, Gigantor and other things, you guys, broke through here and, the
right.
last two studio records charted high and they sold, but it was really like, in Europe and South America. And you guys have been, such a product of that. And, obviously you love Brazilian food. You've talked about that famously. And, it's all great stuff. And, and maybe that's why, you guys continue to do what you do. And I did want to ask you one more question before we get to closing thoughts. And obviously, we're very honored to have you here. But, one of the things that I heard Russell say about the band was that one of the reasons why you guys have been able to stay as a unit and you guys have had such a cohesive amount of success together is that you guys may not hang out as much together as a band. It's almost like, yeah, obviously we're on the same page. There's unity, obviously. You're all great musicians, Jason, Russ, all the three M's. By the way, the triple M's. We have Triple H and wrestling. You guys should just have triple M because it's you, Romeo, and Pinella. I'm sure somebody will pick up on that. But he was talking about the fact, which Doug Pinnick said the same thing about King's X. He had said to me on my platform, we've been together, 45 years, but, we come together, but, we don't really hang out outside of the band. And is that one of the things that has kept you guys a cohesive unit? Is that maybe, yes, we're together, we write music, we tour, but really we kind of have separate backgrounds and we do separate things, or we're separate people outside of Symphony X. You think that's something that's kind of rings true and maybe to keeping the band together and the success you guys have had?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Um, when we're not on the road or we're not recording or rehearsing, we all have our own lives and we do our own thing. So when we come together, it's it's actually real nice because we miss each other and we're happy to see each other, and it makes us, I think, a real cohesive unit. Rather than rather than we're always in each other's faces and every
Yeah.
day. I think I think that's really the main reason. Like we all have our own separate lives, and then we come together. It kind of reminds me of one of those scenes in that Led Zeppelin movie, "The Song Remains the Same,"
Yeah.
where
Yeah, I remember that.
each guy is alone doing their own thing somewhere in Europe, and they get the tour dates, and then they're like, "Oh, tour dates," and then they come together. It's
Yeah, I
kind
can
of
see
like
that.
that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think, it was interesting when he said that because I heard him say that somewhere. And then I had Doug on here and, King's X is 45 years and Zebra's 50 years. And it was Randy Jackson didn't quite say it the same way, but he kind of alluded to it that way. And it made sense because if you're with each other nonstop, even outside of touring in the band, maybe you have that tension. So many bands break up. I mentioned Dream Theater, and they've had some lineup changes. Portnoy was out of the band for over a decade. There's so many bands in hard rock and heavy metal. Judas Priest had many lineup changes. I mean, there's just Iron Maiden had lineup changes. So it's one of the things. Megadeth. Let's not even go there. But I mean,
Mhm.
the point is that maybe that's something that's kept you guys going, and I think that that's why we're very excited about the future of Symphony X, and I can't wait to see you guys here as everybody else is. And one more time, if you want to follow the band, you can do that on Instagram, Facebook, symphonyx.com. And the band will be kicking off their next part of their North American tour starting on September the 4th. And Some of these dates are going to be with Sonata Arctica. You can see them here locally if you're in the tri-state area like me on September the 29th, the Vogel Theater, where King's X just played last week, and Symphony X will be there at the end of September. You can see them also coming up at the Prague Power Fest. They played the 7,000 Tons of Metal earlier this year. The band is also working on a brand new studio album, which will be out in sometime early 2026. And the band has recently celebrated 30 years, an amazing accomplishment. And this guy's the new guy, still only in the band for 26 years. But definitely, we can't wait to see what the band has going forward. And I want to pass the baton to you. I want to give you closing thoughts. You've been very generous with your time, sir. And I want to give you the floor for anything else you want to share or say. And take it away, my friend.
Well, thank you, Reverend, for those two wonderful gifts of yours. Really appreciate it. We'll treasure them. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to have me on. Love your questions. Love your attitude. And I'd love to come back again sometime.
You can come. Listen, you're Mike LePond. You can come back anytime. It's kind of funny because I had Phil Lewis of LA Guns, and he actually shared my thing on Facebook. I want you to talk to Tim Ripperowens. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll jump. Just tell me how far. I'm like, yeah. I mean, so good. Whatever you want. I mean, like I said, Alexander Ford seems to like me, so I don't know why. He probably won't like me much after this interview based on the questions. But no, and what a small world. Joe Dell, so he'll definitely hear this, and I'm sure he'll have a kick with that. Well, you are from Middletown, and he's from Lodi, so that would make sense. So and you're playing in Red Bank, so there you go. Come up September the 29th. But yes, Symphony X is in our Sportswire Radio Hall of Fame. They are also here with Symphony X Day. You can check out the band, like I said, symphonyx.com, Symphony X on Facebook, Instagram. Mike LePond Silent Assassins is also on Instagram. You can follow him there. Also, check out his band work on YouTube, SoundCloud, all the platforms out there. The band is also a part of Nuclear Blast Records with their most recent work of Underworld. It's now 10 plus years old, so go buy it. Also, buy the guitar tabs. You can see all the sheet tabs for it on the band's website. The Odyssey is available, so if you want to play that 24-minute and 14-second song, go ahead and pick up the sheet tabs, and you can try to be like the 3Ms. But my friend, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you've done for me and heavy metal and coming on my platform. And we'll definitely take you up on that offer. We'll see you soon. And I hope to see you out there on the 29th.
See you soon. Thanks.
All right, that is Mike LePond. He is the bassist of the legendary band Symphony X. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, your voice figuratively and literally where all music and wrestling matters. If you're here on Sportswire Radio, please subscribe and like, share, and follow us on all our platforms. I'll be back with the IMF boys here in a little while to get you ready for some all-out warfare. What a small world. Mike LePond wrote 2 songs called Masada and Ragnarok. Yeah, that'll certainly get some people going. But yeah, check out his band, Silent Assassins. Go buy the records out there. And until then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the number one global radio station that is Sportswire Radio, where all wrestling music matters. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. Have a great night.